Well, we're here in the attic.
Yes.
We've been talking about doing the collector's attic for some time, and we're actually doing it now. How about that?
Yeah.
This is where we throw a lot of our garbage. Now, I shouldn't call it garbage. It's highly selected collectibles.
Yeah.
But at any rate, we thought we'd start showing you around our various attics, because this is not the only one.
No, we combined attics.
This
actually.
is, yeah, she already had and she's been collecting for her whole life. I've been
whole life,
collecting,
yes.
and OMG.
Yeah, by the time you combined our two lives, oh my God.
This is part of her
Nuts.
collection. She's always done Hot Wheels.
Yeah,
This is just a
wee
smattering of that. And
yes.
anyway, for this week on the Collector's Attic, we want to start off the Collector's Attic with the Big T.
Oh boy.
Monogram's Big T, 1962.
Wow.
Now, I got one of these for Christmas in 1962, as did thousands of other kids. Unfortunately, mostly boys.
Back then, yes.
That was the nature of things back then. These
Yes.
days, I think it would be split a lot more evenly between boys and girls.
Could be, maybe.
But this was the big toy for 1962, the
boy.
big thing. Plastic models had just erupted. They'd been going on for some time, and we're going to do a show about the history of plastic models. But by 1962, it had exploded. It had become
It
as
was
big
that
as
thing.
it's big as video games is today. And all kids were building them. Most adult males, at least, were building them.
yes.
My father was building them, and he kind of put my brother and I onto it.
Wow.
And so in 1962, we got the Big T. Now,
Oh my goodness.
the surprising thing about the Big T is that it was big. Most model cars were being
They're
done
small.
1/24th scale.
Right.
Right, 1/24th scale. And this was done 1/8 scale.
Wow.
About so big.
That's huge.
And there's some interesting reasons why they did that. But if you look at how the small models were built, the patterns being built by the model builders at the factory were being done in 1/8 scale. And they were being constructed out of wood primarily. And then those would be put on a machine called a reduction pantograph. We're showing right now some pictures from the Model Car Builders Museum,
Right.
where they've got some of the patterns from the early 1960s that were used for making these kits. The reducing pantograph would carve the molds and at the same time reduce the size. And typically they like to reduce by a factor of 3. So in this case, 3 times 8, 24. So they would make 24 scale models and pattern them in 1/8. And I think as the executives were looking at the 1/8 scale patterns, it just occurred to them, why don't we just do a 1-to-1? I'll bet kids would go
easier,
nuts,
yes.
and adults and everybody would just go nuts for that.
Right.
And other people said you couldn't afford it. It'd be such an expensive model. But they went ahead and released it. Here it is. This is one of the ones that we have here in the collection.
Oh, isn't that cool?
Got several of these. Just because I love them to death. And this one is, of course, unbuilt. In fact, all of ours are unbuilt. We don't
Right.
have any built examples
No.
of this right now. But the Big T included quite a few parts, and as you can see,
Yes,
by
203 precision parts.
precision parts.
Yes.
And if you notice the box art here, it just shows a kid building it. And they found that what most kids did is worked with their fathers
Of course.
to build them, that it was a little too much for the kid. And from this point on, all of the marketing for subsequent models showed the son and the father building it as a team. And that particular marketing worked even better for them.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden, father and son teams, because let's face it, the dads wanted them as much, if not more, than the kids.
They also have the sharp tools too.
And, well, in that way, the fathers were really buying it for the kid.
Yes.
While they were building it, of course, for themselves.
It's like the Pinewood Derby. Derby.
But if we look inside this thing, there's a whole bunch of really interesting parts, and it built up into a really impressive car, modeled brake lines, modeled brake drums and everything. It had more detail than you would ever expect to see. Now these are the tires that come with the kit, vinyl. Most of the model car tires back then were vinyl, and these are drag slicks.
Yes.
And then some rather biased regular
Biased ply.
biased ply. interestingly, up until this time also, most of the model cars that were built were promos for cars that had just been built.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the manufacturer said, you know what kids want are hot rods. And they started releasing hot rods, and that went ballistic. This was going to be the upscale ultimate hot rod, so much so that they really poured themselves into this. And it's interesting because people have said, well, there was a real car, the Big T.
Right.
There was. Darryl Starbird's Big T. He did not build that, and then they got the idea to model that. It was the other way around. The Big T was so successful that Monogram hired Darryl Starbird to very quickly build one for the car shows.
Yes.
And that's where the Big T that you see at the car shows came from. Also, some kids couldn't afford it, and because of the way they made model cars on the pantograph, they could still pantograph their 8th scale bits and pieces down to 25th scale, so then they subsequently released it as the little T.
Right.
In 1/24 scale. And you see those all over the place too. Also a huge, huge model for them. But these are the tires. I'm kind of digging into the kit over here.
Oh.
Because of the nature of the collectible, blah, 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 blah. Everything's sort of wrapped up and preserved carefully.
Protected.
And so it's all sort of in bubble wrap.
Oh, my.
One of these kits, I've got several, and I fully intend to build one, in spite of the fact that they're worth quite a bit of money unbuilt. But I just want to build one.
Yeah, I do too.
So that's the top. Here's the body, and the cowling is in here, the radiator shell. There's a television set. The car came with a telephone and a television set. That was like in the 60s. Ed Roth was starting to put crazy things in his hot rods that didn't work, of course.
Yet.
But it's like, wouldn't that be cool if you
Have
could
a
have a
telephone.
telephone in your car? So it's just a receiver that hangs on there with a little coiled cord. And it's like, well, the real car, and all of us kids,
Oh,
yeah,
that is
this
so
particular
cool.
car, the real one has a working phone in
Of
it.
course.
And there's a little antenna for it and everything. Of course, it's BS. There were
Right.
no car phones at the time.
No.
And then it has a television, and that's the console with the television in it.
Oh, how cool.
These are some interesting bits and pieces. They're little stanchions because all the kids were going to the car shows, and that's typically where they were seeing the hot rods.
Right.
So they wanted to release this as a car show hot rod. So it came with stanchions and ropes, so you could rope your car off. And as a kid, I also put the angel hair under it, and I had the color-changing light bulb shooting up on that.
Oh, my.
And then it came with an easel with a placard that described the car, because a lot of the car shows would do that.
Yes.
And then also a trophy, because it won the car
They
show.
have to have a trophy.
So yeah, and then you had a tool set. So you could lay all that stuff out, which was typical to see your chrome-plated tools and everything at the car shows. So this came with all of that stuff.
The fancy stuff.
So that you could put together an entire car show display, and then Monogram even released that as a store display. I'd sure like to find one of those.
Yes.
But and it was all built, and it had a little backdrop and a base to put it on where it looked like it was right in a car show. And the backdrop showed a car show going on in the background. For what it's worth, if you can find one of these things, and they do pop up all the time on eBay and so on, expect to pay somewhere right around $100 for one that's in decent shape and that's complete. A really good box, something that you wouldn't ever think of building, something really collectible, as much as $250. But baseline, $100 to $250, something like that.
A lot of money, but worth it.
But
Yeah, for collectors.
duh, I mean, we got a whole attic full of them here, so, that's just collecting, that's what you do.
That's what you do.
You go looking, and then when you find it, you
Find
have to buy
treasures.
it.
Yes.
Here we have the instructions, and on the back of the instructions you can see the finished model with the stanchions and the whole car show display and everything. And then step-by-step instructions on exactly how you're going to go about building your Big T. Back then they used to put something in the instructions. It's very exotic and strange. It's called writing. Yeah, because kids back then would actually read the instructions in spite of the fact that they're 10 and they build the car.
Right.
instructions today, it's mostly because everything's multinational, and rather
Right.
than deal with language issues, everything is Pictionary stuff.
Yes.
But this is a step-by-step, very accurate description on how to assemble
it.
your big T.
Wow.
Now, at this time, a 25th scale model car typically set you back $1.49. They subsequently went up as they became better.
Well, that was a lot of money
to
back then.
$2. But $1.49. This thing, they said, you know, this is going to cost a fortune. This came out at $10.98.
Wow, back
So
then.
that was an enormous amount of money for a plastic model
No
at the
kidding.
time. And but they sold like hotcakes. They just completely sold out of them. I'm not sure how many runs of these they did, but they subsequently decided that they would release a variant of this every year, and until they sort of burned the market out on this type of model.
Right.
But this is the one that broke the ground. This is the one that really, really launched
Modeling.
the whole piece of business.
Nice.
Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop on over to the channel. And while you're over there, you want to subscribe.
Absolutely.
And you can subscribe by clicking on the blue button, which is going to be appearing zoink right there. You see the blue button? If not, maybe you need to turn your phone. Blue button. That will take you to the channel. Well, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again in a few days or a week or whatever with some more massive screwing around. See you
ya.
then. Bye-bye.
Bye.